So a few weeks ago, I reached out to the man, the myth, the legend, Nathaniel Drew on YouTube. And if you don't know who Nathaniel Drew is, you're probably living under a rock, and you should probably drink alcohol out of this cup. So right now, I've wrapped up my first year of college, freshman year of college, and venturing into the sophomore year. And I've been thinking a lot about this YouTube thing and education in general, because the future is uncertain. There's no way for me to know where I'll be in 2 years, basically. There's no way for me to predict that. So I think I really needed an outsider's perspective on education, life, and ways of approaching education as a young adult. And that's why, on the verge of confusion, I reached out to Nathaniel Drew, and he agreed to hop on a call with me. And here is our conversation about college, about language learning, about everything. Enjoy. I guess the main thing that I really want to learn from you, is just like, because obviously you didn't go to college. And that's kind of like a really exciting conversation to have, because I'm currently I just wrapped up my freshman year in college.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking to myself, like, some of the stuff in there, it is just like, the way that they taught it, it's sucking the curiosity out of you. It's just like, the process of education, it is not a very good system to go about education. So I just like briefly want to hear your thoughts about, like, how do you view, like, your views on education and your ways of, like, going about educating yourself without going to college.
Yeah, I mean, man, I'm having this conversation with a lot of people lately where they're like, yeah, I'm going to college right now, and it's just it sucks the curiosity out of me. It's just like, I don't know, it wears me out, or there's a lot of different permutations of that, and I don't know, there's an issue with that, because I don't think that's what education should feel like. I don't know how to put it exactly. I don't want to say something grandiose, like that's not human nature, but my experience is that when I'm learning something that feeds me, it only grows that desire to learn, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And of course, we all go through ebbs and flows. That's something I say a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Like periods where you can kind of consume a lot of information and like synthesize it and do something with it. And periods where you're more not needing so much input, it's periods of like processing or output or whatever it may be. But yeah, I do think that oftentimes through my own little experience with college, because I spent 2 semesters in a community college doing like a dual credit program. So I was still in high school. And then through talking with people that I know, like my friends, it just seems like it's taught in a way that's sterile. It's like disconnected from the actual use. Because I don't think anybody would find biology anything other than fascinating if we could just see, like, if we could just pour that information and learn it in a way that's just connected with life, because life is incredible, But hold on, I will get my tea.
All good.
And then I will.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks for the patience.
Perfect. Okay.
So, yes, you wanted to do a
okay.
World peace is none of your business.
I've got alcohol, may contain alcohol.
Yeah, I saw that in your latest video. Great. Love that.
I'm just tucking that away, like no alcohol out in the video.
How was the reaction to that? You like,
I don't know. Like, I'm not against booze, so I'm just kind of like, just chilling. How do you feel about, like, booze? Because I watched your video on, like, no alcohol for 30 days.
Yeah, it's just, that was a little experiment that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I realized, oh man, I'm feeling dependent in some way or another on something, that bothers me.
For sure.
To show myself, like, what, I can totally be fine without alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, it did take me down a route. I should have done a follow-up video, because it sort of took me down a path of less social life. And the truth is, like, it's totally possible to have a vibrant social life without alcohol. But in general, I mean, people drink alcohol, and it's really up to you how much you consume.
Mm-hmm.
But I think getting, it's tricky. If you go to a lot of parties, you start to notice that, and I don't, but like, especially right now, I don't. But I think I started to notice that people, if you're not drinking anything, and they're drinking quite a bit, there starts to be like this sort of gap between where you guys are at.
For sure.
And at first it's like fine, and you're observing and whatnot, but then afterwards, like, maybe this reveals truly how stupid it is to drink alcohol, because then it feels like you're unable to actually have any sort of stimulating conversation. And I don't know if it's down to the alcohol, or if it's down to the people, or what. I guess my conclusion here is that it's okay to drink a beer every once in a while. Like,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, because I think like a few nights ago, because like I'm really big on writing. Writing's like
yeah,
one of the few obsessions that I have. So basically my friend Cooper and I we hopped on a call, and then he's like, "Hey, do you want to like just get a few shots in before we start writing?" I'm just like, "That's a great idea." So we just like removed all inhibitions, and some of the stories that came out of that session were just hilarious and borderline
yeah.
just like hysterical. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that once again reveals how it might be much more about the company, and
Mm.
the context of the situation. Uh, that's the thing. Alcohol can sometimes be. I've been in situations, and I don't want to be in these situations anymore. But I've been in situations where it's like I'm not enjoying the music, or I'm not enjoying the people, or whatever, and
Mm.
I'm trying to use alcohol as a way to solve that, and that is
Mm.
never the solution. You
Never.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I want to answer your previous
For
question.
sure.
Uh,
How does your learning like schedule look
Yeah.
like?
For me, education is up there with a few of the other like main themes of life, I suppose, or
Mm-hmm.
life for me. Um, like creativity, for example, which is that it's sort of all encompassing in my life. So much of my life is actually about education. It's not just, this is my education time, I'm learning. Like for me, education can look like the traditional things that we think of, right? Like taking a class, but it can also be reading a book. It can be absolutely writing. It can be, watching a video or listening to a podcast or a conversation with somebody. It's the exchange and development of ideas. And so I think my education, it's just something that sort of a part of every aspect of my life, if you will. The mental block a lot of people struggle with to get to that place is that we're told essentially throughout all of childhood
Mm-hmm.
that you must actually get a piece of paper, a diploma, or whatever it is to show that you actually got an education. And without that, you didn't actually get an education. Like none of the rest of it counts. And that's just not true. And it's not the world we live in anymore. Like things are so fast moving that it's not realistic to think you're going to get a job that you're going to stick with for the rest of your life. This sort of uh, education, or like, training and preparation for different roles in your life, I think it should be a constant thing.
There's also a really interesting thing, which is kind of like we both share just mutual interest in, let's say, cinematography, because some of your shots are just absolutely just like, whoa, that looks like it's something out of a fucking movie. But the thing is, at least for me, I'm not sure if it's the same case for you. I didn't go to school for cinematography. I didn't go to school for
Yeah.
editing. Like, it's just kind of like I was 11 and I just happened to have a copy of iMovie on my mom's MacBook,
Yeah.
and I started
Yeah.
editing. And I just started editing videos that way. Do you feel like education's a theoretical thing, or do you think like the practical, should I say, aspects of education is more important?
Yeah, I would say it depends. It's easy, definitely in a more creative field like filmmaking, to say you don't need it. You really don't. You
Mm-hmm.
have all the potential tutorials you could ever need already out there. My real education when it came to filmmaking was finding small production companies and whatnot around Portland, which is where I'm from,
Mm-hmm.
and literally just working with them, observing them, asking questions, helping in any sort of capacity, paid or unpaid. I mean, that's just what I did for a period of a couple of years. I took a film class in the community college sort of situation that I told you about, where we were watching movies and sort of analyzing them. And that's like fun, I guess, but it didn't help me in any way become a better filmmaker. And it's certainly stuff that I could have done by myself. So there are certain professions where it makes sense to have to go to some sort of standardized like education, if you will, so that you know what you're doing. Like I understand why a doctor has to do what a doctor has to do to become a doctor. Ultimately, more and more, if you're really interested in learning something, it's really, there are less gatekeepers now. It's really
Mm-hmm.
about you kind of going for it and digging and exploring and asking questions and reaching out to people and trying things out for yourself. Is this making you question continuing college? Like, I'm
Yeah,
wondering about that.
it's first year really kind of disappointed me, but like the only thing that's keeping me there are like the creative writing classes and kind of like the on-campus
Mm,
experience, which was stripped away, unfortunately, for this
right.
year, because YouTube recently really took off. and it became like it.
For you.
Yeah, for me, it really took off, and I'm just like,
yeah, I saw it's growing really quickly,
Yeah.
dude. You're gonna blow up. You're blowing up. You're in the process of blowing up.
have you also had that process happen to you, like that, like thing of blowing
Yeah.
up? Yeah.
It was nuts, dude. Like it's intense. It's really really intense, and there's nothing that in my life previously that prepared me for
No.
what was coming. Yeah, so I always tell this story. Basically, last April was when everything really began for me. Before that, I didn't have hardly any subscribers, and in the span of that month, I got 165,000 subscribers. It was ridiculous.
Damn.
It was too much at once, and it was because I had created a series of videos that all sort of triggered each other at once. Like one of them took off, and then they all sort of started getting recommended. I'm so lucky to get to do what I do, to have this lifestyle. Like I can create stuff that's meaningful to me and that people care about that. Like it's incredible. It is incredible to me that people care.
The other thing I want to really get your opinions on is language learning. From your videos, like from one of your videos about language learning. So you talked about how you did 1 year of exchange in France, and that's how you kind of like picked up a lot of language and a lot of like also like the culture of French culture. Recently I started, this is my first year of learning French, and it was really interesting. I basically hopped on a call with this like French person on Discord, and I'm just like, hey, that's really interesting. And I started conversing with her using however little French I've got, and she basically said to me, holy crap, your French is probably at a B1, B2 level. I'm just like, how does that happen? Because from like all the seminars at school, I basically didn't pay any attention. But all the French that I did learn, because I devour French podcasts and movies and like poetry and music like a demon, basically. If I have a spare second, I'll just read something in French, listen to something in French. Like I do this like shower conversations, like where I pretend that I'm in like a French cafe.
Dude, you're doing all the right things. I mean, you do need to channel that demon energy for sure.
I'm just curious, like how, because like with your Italian videos, after like got like 5 months, 6 months, like the gap between the videos, you were speaking Italian, just like going off. Like how did you?
Well, a big part of that was that I was able to spend time in the country itself for sure. So that will help. There's nothing like true like immersion. So if you get the chance to come to France, I highly recommend it. It will have an impact on you and your perspective of the world. And once I got a taste of that for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I need more of this,
Yeah.
I hope that what you gathered from my language learning videos was that language does not have to be you climb the entire mountain all at once.
No.
It much more a situation of, can you be strategic about this? Can you prioritize? Can you break things down into smaller pieces? And you will make a lot of progress, like you claim to. The fact that you're able to communicate without having done too much or any formal education with French.
I've done like a whole year at school. She also said like a lot of people they've learned like a few years of French, but they just couldn't speak it. But for me, it's the other way around. Because like right now my grammar isn't perfect, but it's just like communication and then just like using a few tenses that actually do exist in conversations.
That's exactly it. It's like you're taught in school that if it's not right, it's wrong and it's just worthless. You know what I mean? But that's not how language works. It's like you can say something incorrectly, but people are getting the idea and you're like having an exchange, and it will get better over time by doing more and more of that. I think definitely what I learned from my exchange here in France was that I suffered through the experience. Like I went through and had no understanding of how language works. So I just was like in this hurricane and like just making my way through it. But what I learned from that is that it doesn't have to be like that. You're doing a great job of preparing yourself ahead of time. And again, this is why I talk about the things like, prioritizing the most commonly used words and phrases and whatnot, and like getting those down. That will help you so much, and you can sort of accelerate the process if you are willing to be a demon about it. But it can also be this really slow process that you enjoy and explore and just like savor over time. I've just found though that when you build some momentum, you got to ride the momentum while it's there and get to a place where you're solid, and then you can kind of maintain, but I think you're probably, if I'm not mistaken, you're probably feeling like the doors are opening for yourself, or you're having access to new things that you didn't have before.
Like in certain cases, there are things in French, for example, like a very distinct word in French is le flâneur. Like in English, there's not a word for, you can call it the roamer, or like the person that roams around that has no job, or like the traveler or whatever. But like it just doesn't, like all those words, they just don't have the same connotation as le flâneur. But I don't know, whenever your brain gets on a French frequency, it's so different and it's so like magical when you're able to penetrate into that world. So just to close it off, what are some of your advice for like high school graduates that are about to go into college? What advice would you give those people? Should they take a gap year, or should they go to college basically?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to prescribe any specific solution to anybody because it's going to come down to circumstances and where you're coming from, where you want to go. I would say oftentimes, though, people finishing high school aren't clear on what the next stage is yet, which is normal for the record. That's okay. But I wouldn't rush into a very, very expensive decision before it needs to happen. So if that means a gap year where you're working and you're traveling and or it doesn't have to be traveling, it could be just working and meeting professionals and getting out there and creating stuff. If that's what that looks like, then go for it. You might get a lot of answers from that, and that might help you make a much more a much better calibrated decision in the long term. People go back to college much later on, well into their 20s or in their 30s or later in life, and that's okay too. And so I think my advice really is just to not rush really, really big decisions where they don't need to be rushed. There's this sort of pressure like, oh, I need to immediately do this after high school. And I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that. I think there are many ways to be successful in life. And as long as we can continue to explore that and be open to those possibilities, I don't know. I think that's more of the kind of world that I want to live in, instead of this is what you have to do.
All right. Anyhow, thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
A pleasure for me too. Really appreciate you reaching out. I think it's so great what you're doing on your channel, and I'm excited to see your videos continue to pull in more and more people, and the adventures that you have planned in the future. It's going to be really cool.
For sure. Thanks, man.